All right, as we are continuing to play with our composited layers to make a jumble that we like, we have trouble sometimes seeing the whole image. So I want you to remember Command plus zooms in Photoshop and Photopea. Command minus zooms out. And then to fit it all on the screen, which is very helpful as you're trying to finish it off, is Command 0. They're all designed that way so you can use your thumb to hit Command, and then you just use your middle finger to hit 0, minus, or plus. So it's very easy to navigate. Once you're zoomed in, if you hold down the space bar, right, and I do it with my left hand, then you can just click and move around anywhere you're zoomed in. This is called the panning tool. You're not actually moving anything, you're just changing your view of the screen. But always Command 0 will fit everything within your window. Okay, the setting that you might have turned on for your tool is for the Move tool. And it might even be the default on this newest version of Photoshop because I saw it when I was coming around and helping a lot of you. Notice the Move tool has Auto Select for Layer. I want you to have that unchecked so you get used to only selecting your layers yourself, right? Otherwise, the layer that's on top is always going to be the one that gets selected. The next thing is Show Transform Controls. If that is checked, like it is for many of you, it means you don't have to hit Command T, but it will just keep showing you transform boxes everywhere, and it's hard to know what they're applying to. So you want to turn that off so that you only see a transform box when you hit Command T and when you know what it is you want to transform. All right, with that in mind, I'm now going to zoom in, and I'm going to use my lasso, and I'm going to clean up certain layers. And this does not need to be perfect. Obviously, to do really strong work, you need to be willing to spend time. And when we're in an intro class like this, getting used to these techniques, especially on an introductory exercise, it's not about trying to be a perfectionist with it. It's trying to use the techniques, be introduced to them, experiment with them, make mistakes with them, but just demonstrate your learning. So we don't need every little stray mark to be perfect. And maybe certain things bug you, like this bugs me a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that little chunk from the tail, which is that layer, just so it's a little bit clearer and more intentional. This little bit bugs me, but I'd have to find where that layer is, and I'd have to go through each layer and delete. So if I didn't want to have to do that, and I'm trying to find what layer is this, that is when you might use auto select, especially if you have a lot more than 5 layers. And when you click on it, it's supposed to automatically select the layer that you click on. The problem is when we have multiply turned on, all of these layers have pixels a lot of places. So it's just always going to go to a top layer. So that's why I want you to get used to kind of the eyeballs for understanding. And that shows me, okay, yeah, this is the layer that's on. So that's what I want to delete from. And then we have a little signature here. So let's say that the artist wanted to sue me. Really helps if I left their signature in there for them to say, oh yeah, that is mine. But we'll be talking more about like how to use these other people's pixels responsibly. And the goal is to not make any of them easily recognizable by their creators. But I got to find where that signature comes from. There it is, and then delete it. And then I don't like this, that kind of arbitrary cutoff. And the more you zoom in, the more details you might see that you want to change. And this one, let's clean that up a little bit. And that is why this art form, though very different than analog drawing, is no no less time consuming when you want to control it in certain ways, right? And actually I've changed my mind. I do want that, so I can go back. I might even want to duplicate that and then transform it and use that texture a little bit more, to kind of fill it all. And then I just don't like how this one goose image, which is at the very bottom, is so strong. So now that I have all this other stuff going on, I feel free to just take away some of these big swooping lines and let the composition kind of stand on its own in most of these areas. So in creative writing, they call it kill your darlings. In digital editing, once you have all your layers, you might decide some of those that you were depending on the whole time are actually getting in the way of the overall benefit you're trying to show. Okay. Yeah, I think that works. So the goal is that now that we have used line art from a certain theme, that now this image, no matter how we see it, whether it's upright like this or whether we rotate it, you don't need to do this, but I'll just show you. It's still kind of an interesting composition either way. Right? Upside down, maybe even mirrored and flipped. So once you feel it's like that, you're ready to submit this project. But to get the very best quality, I'm going to point out something so picky, because I was trained by very picky art directors. So this is supposed to be a black and white project. And yet when I zoom in on this layer, which is the one where I took color away, these look like red and yellow. There's little traces still. So how can I ultimately clean this all up? Well, what I'm going to do is not have any of these eventually on multiply mode. So this is how I want you to clean everything up and organize it. You're going to select all your layers except for your blank background by holding down Shift and selecting the whole column of them once you're happy with your composition. And then you're going to hit the folder icon that's in your layer tools. That turns it into a group. Then you're going to hit Command J to duplicate that group. Now within that group are all of your layers. But what's nice about grouping them is now I can turn this one off. So I have all my component layers. And on this one, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say Merge Group. And that will flatten that into one layer. There are multiple ways to do that, but ultimately this is a non-destructive way to combine everything into one place. Now that that's all in one place, notice it's at normal mode, right? I want it at normal mode, but I want it only to be clean black and white. No longer these reds. So what can I do? I can go to, now that it's all in one place, I can go to Image Adjustments, Levels, and I'm going to push the lights, clean it up a little bit, push the darks, darken those a little bit, right? And then I can do one other thing. I can say double click on this combined layer. Well, actually not yet. Okay, sorry. I can clearly see all the whites I want, but still in my blacks, there's still some very saturated color within that one layer, right? Because it came from a very colorful file. So what do I want to do now? I want to delete all the white. So how can I do that? We looked at it before. I'm going to use my magic wand with contiguous unchecked, and I'm going to click on the black pixels, and then I'm going to duplicate them, Command J. Then I'm going to turn off the layer behind. Now what that did is it selected all of those black pixels. So it got rid of the color ones. And that kind of cleans it up. Also what it did is it got rid of all of the white pixels. So now if I turn off my background white, you'll see a checkerboard. And that's how Photoshop shows you that there are no pixels in that space. It is empty space. Now this is the project I want, right? This is line art that's black, that's composited from 5 sources in my own composition without any other pixels, without any white pixels. So now how do I save it? Oh, and at this point, if I want to edit it, I can. It's just all in one place. So if I want to get rid of this rat, the rat's head, maybe the rat's back, I can do that in this combined layer. This is kind of my final layer on the top, and it's the only one I have visible. Now to save it, I can hit Command S. That will save it as the PSD file, but to post it to Canvas, you cannot post a Photoshop file to Canvas. It's way too big. We need to post an online file format, which is either a JPEG or a PNG. I'm going to save it as both, and you're going to tell me the difference between them. So if I go to File, Save As, and I look at Format, this is Photoshop format, I want to change it to a PNG or a JPEG. Notice that I do not have that option. That's because Photoshop is trying to protect you here. And whenever you do a loss compression format, which is a lower quality than a working format, it will ask you to make a copy rather than just save as. Save as is for replacing. Save a copy is for making a different format version. So I click on Save a Copy. And you can also do that under File where it says Save a Copy, right? But if you go to Save As, you can also click on Save a Copy. Now, I can say Photoshop under Format and scroll to JPEG. And I'll see that little tag change. And it will sometimes add the word copy. But as long as it's a different format type, that's fine. And I save it. And because it's a loss compression, it's going to give me this little slider with JPEGs. That's why JPEGs are so popular. I'll usually slide it down to 10 to save memory, and it will preview how much memory that takes. So that's 2.9 megabytes. Okay. Now I'm going to save it again. Notice it's the PSD file. This time I'm just going to go to File, Save a Copy. And I'm going to save it as a PNG file. These are the two options you have for saving it. And there's just a subtle difference. This is what it looks like in Photoshop. Now when I go to my folder where I saved it, which is just where my Photoshop file was, I will also see my JPEG, which I mark as orange, because that's what I mark for online file types, and my PNG, which I'll also mark as orange. If I double click on them, they'll open up in preview. That's what the JPEG looks like. And then if I open my PNG up in preview, this is what that looks like. So what is the difference between them? Yeah, they both show the black line art, right? But JPEG cannot have empty space. So JPEG will fill any empty space that's shown with the checkerboard here in Photoshop. It will fill it with white pixels. JPEGs are always a solid rectangle of pixels, right? So it's what's called not supporting transparency. PNGs, which are also an online file format, support transparency. And the only reason it's filling it in with dark gray is because that's the default background of preview of this image program. But if I opened that onto a website that had a red background, then red would show through everything. So this is like a transparent sticker. This is like an opaque sticker, where all transparency is turned white. Why does that matter? Well, if I print on a t-shirt a JPEG image, that means if it's on a red t-shirt, there's going to be a big white rectangle behind my line art. If I want that red to show through the image, I need to save it in a format that supports transparency. And the online raster format that does that is PNG. So that's why we have to know both of them. Because our background in Canvas is white, it doesn't really matter how you post it, right? Because it's going to look the same in Canvas either way. But I'm going to choose the PNG just because. PNGs do take up a little bit more memory than JPEGs, but they're both good for Canvas. So now I'm going to go to where I post exercise 1, and I'm going to find my entry, and I'm going to click on Edit, the 3 little dots, Notice I'm not full screen.